The colony of Starlight Haven wasn't just a place, it was a testament. It sprawled across the vast, echoing blackness of an asteroid belt, an intricate habitat of salvaged space debris and asteroid rock. Its domes, tunnels, and hydroponic farms were a marvel of self-sustaining engineering. Here, engineers hummed through pressurized tunnels, hydroponic farmers tended glowing crops under artificial suns, and children laughed freely in zero-G recreation domes, their joy echoing through the metallic structures. It felt safe, it felt permanent. Then, that comforting hum was shattered. Commander Valerius Val Stone stood rigid in the primary ops center. His face, usually a mask of stoic, battle-hardened resolve, was now etched with deep, grim lines. His eyes, typically sharp and decisive, seemed to hold the crushing weight of the entire star system. On the central holographic display, a terrifying image spun slowly, a colossal rock, miles wide, tumbling relentlessly through the profound darkness of space. Its surface was scarred, ancient, and utterly indifferent to the small, vibrant world it was hurtling towards. "Commander, final trajectory confirmed," a young technician named Finn stammered, his voice barely a whisper, strained with fear. "Asteroid designation, the Oblivion. Direct collision course with Starlight Haven." Valerius's jaw clenched tight. "Impact time." Navigation specialist Lyra Solaris, usually so swift and precise with her fingers on the console, fumbled. Her hands trembled slightly. 68 hours, Commander. 68 hours. 0 minutes, 0 seconds. On the main screen, the stark digital countdown began its relentless, chilling march. Impact. In 68 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. Each ticking second felt like a heavy hammer blow, striking dread into the heart of their home. A quiet but chilling panic began to spread through the ops center. Valerius had seen this particular look before in ancient Earth historical footage, the utterly helpless faces of a population facing extinction. Starlight Haven simply had no planetary defense grid, no giant laser arrays, no massive kinetic impactors. Those were luxuries for the core worlds, for established civilizations with limitless resources. Starlight Haven was built on sheer grit, on defiant determination, not on orbital cannons. "Our long-range particle deflectors?" Valerius asked, even though the desperate question already tasted like ash in his mouth. "Insufficient, Commander," Finn replied, shaking his head slowly, his shoulders slumping. "They're designed for micrometeoroids and solar flares, not a small moon-sized object. It's too dense, too massive." Senior technicians huddled together, their voices low, urgent, yet utterly devoid of hope. Their faces were etched with absolute defeat. Dr. Orion Finch, Starlight Haven's brilliant, but notoriously eccentric astrophysicist and gadgeteer, watched from the corner. His already rumpled lab coat seemed even more disheveled in the harsh glow of the screen. He saw the profound defeat in their eyes. He heard the choked sobs coming over the comms, families desperately trying to make sense of a doomsday they couldn't possibly fight. Valerius's usually unshakable leader looked utterly broken. His strong shoulders, usually so capable, seemed to slump under an immense, invisible weight. "There's simply nothing," a lead engineer muttered, running a weary hand through his thinning hair. "No fusion driver, no heavy-lift rockets with enough thrust to push it. We're just waiting for it." The silence that followed was heavier, more suffocating than the asteroid itself. 68 hours. Just under 3 agonizing days until everything they had painstakingly built, every single hope they cherished, would be crushed into meaningless stardust. Part 2. The Unconventional Genius and the Ridiculous Idea. Dr. Orion Finch's lab was usually a glorious, controlled mess. Exotic crystal formations pulsed with light, next to intricate, disassembled antique star charts. Charts detailing peculiar cosmic anomalies mingled freely with complex engineering blueprints for zero-G sculptures. Amidst this delightful chaos, Orion often found his clearest, most brilliant thoughts. But today, Even his beloved lab felt oppressive, filled with the low, constant hum of a dying colony. He sat by a small, self-contained kinetic sculpture, watching its delicately balanced weight spin in perfect silent harmony. He picked up a spool of experimental quantum weave filament, a material he'd been developing for ultra-lightweight structural supports. He ran his thumb thoughtfully over the impossibly thin yet incredibly strong thread. He remembered old theories about the subtle, cumulative power of orbital mechanics and tidal forces. How a moon's gravity, though weak over vast distances, could influence colossal ocean tides, or how a tiny constant force could move massive objects over time, if applied just right. That was the moment it clicked, not with a sudden dramatic bang, but with a quiet, insistent click. Like a perfectly tuned lock finally turning. Moo, he thought of a subtle nudge. It's like trying to move a sleeping giant with a whisper, not a shout. He mumbled to himself. A constant, tiny tug, applied just right. The concept of redirecting a massive object with minimal force, using a gravitational lever, took hold in his brilliant mind. Gravitational lever system, he muttered, staring intently at the quantum weave filament in his hand. But not with a giant planet, with string. He shot up from his chair, almost toppling a beaker filled with luminescent cosmic dust. The idea, so ridiculously simple, so utterly absurd, yet so profoundly elegant, exploded in his mind. He didn't need to push the oblivion with some colossal, impossible force. No, he needed to guide its own immense gravitational pull. He just needed to gently coax it. All ashore, he burst into the primary ops center, looking even more disheveled than usual, his wild hair sticking out in every direction. He clutched the spool of quantum weave filament tightly, as if it were a sacred, ancient artifact, the key to their survival. "Commander!" "Valerius!" he practically bellowed, his voice hoarse with a mix of exhaustion and sheer, unbridled excitement. Valerius Val Stone, his eyes still painfully fixed on the terrifying relentless countdown, barely even turned his head. His focus was entirely on the approaching doom. "Orion, now is absolutely not the time for your theoretical sculptures, or whatever peculiar contraption that is." "It's not a contraption, it's a solution." "Commander, I've got it!" He stumbled eagerly over to the main display, pointing wildly at the spinning image of the Oblivion. "We don't need to push it, we need to guide it. Like a cosmic kite." The few remaining senior technicians in the room exchanged bewildered, exhausted glances. Finn raised an incredulous eyebrow. Lyra, looking utterly worn out, stared at him as if he'd finally and irrevocably snapped under the pressure. "Dr. Finch," Valerius said, his voice dangerously strained, barely holding back a torrent of frustration. "Are you honestly suggesting we try to divert an extinction event with glorified string and glorified paper aeroplanes? My people are facing oblivion." "This is not a joke, Orion." Orion, completely undeterred by the commander's anger, began to explain, speaking in a rapid, impassioned torrent of words. No, not a joke at all. It's a gravitational lever system. We use multiple, small, precisely placed micro-thruster pods, each tethered to the Oblivion, by incredibly long, immensely durable, and astonishingly thin, quantum weave filaments. A new experimental material, Commander. These pods don't push the asteroid directly, not with brute force. They apply a tiny, constant, tangential sideways tug. Think of it like a whisper that changes a scream's direction. We just need to slightly alter its rotational wobble, which will, over distance, subtly shift its entire gravitational footprint. He waved the spool of filament emphatically. It's exactly like trying to turn a colossal, sleeping giant. You don't just yank it hard. You apply constant, gentle pressure, and it slowly, precisely changes its direction. The asteroid's gravity is pulling us, yes, but we can use that very pull, just a tiny bit, to subtly shift itself. Valerius stared at him, his mind reeling. The sheer, audacious absurdity of it. Redirecting a doomsday rock, a colossal killer, with what amounted to cosmic threat, it was beyond ridiculous. But then, his gaze flickered back to the relentlessly ticking countdown. 67 hours, 55 minutes, and 0 seconds. All other options were utterly exhausted. All the high-tech solutions they desperately needed, they simply didn't have. They had nothing. Absolutely nothing. "It's not about brute strength, Commander," Orion continued, his voice calmer now, seeing a faint, flickering spark of thought in Valerius's tired eyes. "It's about leverage and time. We're not pulling it. We're guiding its own gravity. Every tiny degree of change, every millisecond of that tangential tug, counts, Commander, because that tiny degree means hundreds of kilometers over the vast, empty expanse of space. It just needs a persistent coaxing." Valerius took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He looked at the desperate, fear-filled faces of his crew, then back at the relentless, ticking countdown. He hated this. He hated the sheer desperation that had brought them to this point, but he hated losing even more. "All right, Finch," he finally conceded, his voice a gruff, exhausted whisper. "It's wild. It's insane. It's probably against every known scientific and military regulation ever written, but we're completely out of options. You get one chance. If this fails, then it's over." A faint, almost invisible relieved smile touched Orion's lips. He knew this was Valerius's way of saying yes. "Miracles, Commander?" "No. Just good physics. And a very, very long thread." Part 3. Assembling the unlikely crew. The news of Dr. Finch's outlandish plan spread like wildfire through Starlight Haven, igniting a strange mix of desperate hope and bewildered skepticism among the colonists. Commander Valerius Stone himself went on the colony-wide broadcast, explaining Orion's wild ideas in a highly simplified, yet surprisingly reassuring way. "We will not be destroyed," he stated, his voice firm, resolute. "Dr. Finch has proposed an unconventional solution, utilizing the fundamental principles of gravity in a novel, and frankly, quite audacious way. We will attempt to coax the asteroid off course. Every able body, every willing hand, report for assignment." Initial reactions were, predictably, a cacophony of opinions. "Quantum weave string? Against an asteroid? Are they joking?" A colonist scoffed loudly in the communal hall. But another, a hardened deep space mechanic, retorted, "What else are we going to do? Yell at it until it moves? At least this is something." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a fragile, grudging hope began to take root in the hearts of the desperate colonists. Valerius knew, with absolute certainty, that they couldn't pull this off alone. They needed a team. A very specific, very skilled team that could somehow translate Orion's wildly eccentric vision into a tangible reality. His first call was to Tactical Officer Serafina Sarah Vance. Sarah was, without a doubt, Starlight Haven's absolute master of drone operations and precise spatial maneuvers. Her mind was a fortress of pure logic, her approach to every problem meticulously calculated and impeccably structured. Her biggest personal challenge, Valerius knew, would be grappling with the inherent fuzziness of Orion's wildly unconventional theoretical physics. Valerius found Sarah already in the drone bay, surrounded by swirling holographic schematics, a frown of intense concentration on her face. "Sarah, I need you to design and execute the perfect deployment for micro-thruster pods, capable of incredibly precise thrust vectoring, even when tethered. Your drones need to deploy them with absolute, pinpoint accuracy onto a spinning, irregularly shaped rock." Sarah pushed her glasses further up her nose, her eyes narrowing in thought. "Commander, with all due respect," she began, her voice tinged with professional exasperation, "Dr. Finch's gravitational lever approach defies virtually every known conventional orbital mechanic. It's messy. My algorithms thrive on clean lines, on perfectly predictable outcomes. This, Commander, is like trying to compute the chaotic variables of a cosmic feather tickle." But even as she voiced her strong objections, her fingers were already flying across a console, running simulations, calculating variables at an astonishing speed. The sheer audacious technical challenge was, despite her protests, already deeply intriguing her brilliant mind. Next, lead engineer Jackson "Jax" Kalin. Jax was a gruff, experienced engineer known for his practical, no-nonsense solutions, and an uncanny ability to fix almost anything with whatever minimal tools were at hand. His crucial role, overseeing the rapid fabrication and meticulous calibration of the microthruster pods, and ensuring the absolute integrity of the delicate filament deployment systems. His biggest challenge, working with a material as incredibly thin and seemingly fragile as quantum weave. Valerius found Jax meticulously checking every pressure gauge and circuit on a prototype thruster pod. "Jax, you'll be overseeing the fabrication and deployment of our quantum weave tethers to the Oblivion. Precision is paramount, and the material is sensitive." Jax simply nodded, his eyes as steady and unwavering as distant stars. "Commander, just tell me what needs to be built, and what needs to hold. If it can be fixed, it'll hold." His dry, understated determination was a rare gem, always perfectly timed to cut through the mounting tension. And then, there was navigation specialist Lyra Solaris. Lyra had an almost intuitive understanding of celestial mechanics, honed from years of deep focus on virtual simulations, and less on physical interaction. Her vital role, making real-time minute adjustments to the thrust vectors based on incoming telemetry, essentially piloting the asteroid's gravitational shift. Her biggest challenge, translating theoretical nudges into actual, physical changes, relying on a sense of feel rather than just data. "Lyra," Valerius explained, his voice serious, "this isn't just about inputting data, it's about feeling the celestial currents, feeling the subtle shifts. It's like cosmic ballet, with a very, very heavy dancer." Lyra's eyes, usually bright with the glow of digital displays, widened slightly. "So, I'm the cosmic choreographer? Got it. My high score on GravSim 7 feet is about to get a very real-world equivalent." She cracked her knuckles, a nervous habit, already mentally rehearsing the intricate, high-stakes maneuvers, her gamer's mind already mapping out the celestial challenge. But the most unexpected, and arguably most invaluable additions to the team, were a few grizzled, seasoned colonists, veterans of a different kind of frontier. Old Man Tiber, a legendary miner with a face weathered like an ancient star chart and hands calloused from decades of drilling into asteroids. He understood the nuances of tether tension, orbital currents, and obscure, unyielding knot tying in zero-G. And Elara Voss, a textile engineer who had spent her life working with exotic materials, who knew more about fiber tension, material integrity, and the properties of woven filaments than anyone else alive. "Quantum weave, you say?" Old Man Tiber chuckled, a low, rumbling sound, as he ran his gnarled fingers thoughtfully over a sample of the filament. "Looks like a good thread. Strong, but you gotta know your knots, son. One bad knot, and your big rock gets away, taking your whole home with it." Elara added, her voice calm and authoritative. "And the stress points. It's all about how the force distributes through the weave. Too much on one thread, it snaps. Too little, it does nothing. You gotta feel the tension, every whisper of it, even when it's miles away in the vacuum." These seasoned veterans quickly became indispensable, invaluable mentors. They taught Lyra Jackson the subtle, almost intuitive art of feeling the tension, explaining how to anticipate stress points, how to compensate for micromovements, and how the smallest, almost imperceptible vibration could signal a catastrophic problem. Their practical, almost intuitive knowledge, born from years of hands-on experience, was a strange but utterly perfect complement to Sarah's cold, hard data, and Orion's grand, often outlandish theories. The initial days of preparation were a frantic, chaotic blur, punctuated by moments of unexpected humor. Sarah would often get visibly frustrated, muttering under her breath, "This isn't a clean algorithm, Dr. Finch. This is pure guesswork with a thread. Where is the predictability coefficient for a miner's intuition in my code?" Orion would just smile, a knowing glint in his eye. "Sometimes, Sarah, the universe prefers a little improvisation, and maybe a lot of feeling." Jax, in training for his dangerous spacewalk, looked like a cosmic mechanic, trying desperately to tie a thread around a moving mountain. He practiced fabricating and attaching custom anchor points to a simulated spinning asteroid, tethered to the ground, often getting comically tangled in the process. He'd just sigh, adjust his helmet with a weary precision, and try again, his patience seemingly boundless. Lyra, meanwhile, broke several practice filaments, her intense virtual reality experience sometimes proving too sharp, causing her to overcompensate wildly for the delicate, nuanced touch required. Orion would calmly guide her, his voice gentle and encouraging. "Think of it like a precision ballet move, Lyra, not a power thrust. You just need to caress the controls, just barely engage them." Unknown to the humans, the advanced alien scouts of the Cygnian Syndicate continued their dispassionate observation from afar. They were an ancient, supremely logical species, with sleek, almost ethereal bodies of living light and multifaceted eyes that processed astronomical amounts of data with astonishing, unfathomable speed. They had witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall throughout the cosmos, often due to catastrophic celestial impacts. They considered humanity to be primitive, amusingly chaotic, and regrettably prone to unpredictable, illogical emotional outbursts. This bizarre gravitational lever system idea was, in their cold, logical estimation, just further, compelling proof of humanity's quaint, almost laughable, and utterly inefficient nature. Their data logs simply noted, primitive species attempting inefficient orbital mitigation attempt, probability of success, 0.000001%. They filed it away as an interesting, albeit utterly futile, experiment. Their algorithms calculated the inevitable end. Part 4. The Execution, a cosmic ballet of thread. The launch day was a maelstrom of controlled chaos. Micro-thruster pods looking less like advanced spacecraft and more like oversized, custom-built fireworks, sat poised on their temporary launch pads. Each held a tightly coiled spool of the quantum weave filament. Impossibly thin yet promising unimaginable strength. Commander Valerius Val Stone stood on the observation deck, his face a mask of professional calm, but his knuckles were stark white as he gripped the railing, betraying the immense tension coiling within him. T-10 minutes to first pod launch. Sarah's voice crackled over the comms, a faint tremor of nervous energy in her usually unshakable tone. Her array of precision drones, sleek and metallic, buzzed like angry hummingbirds, hovering near the launch tubes, ready for their critical deployment. The first micro-thruster pod roared to life, with a thunderous blast, a fiery needle piercing the perpetual twilight sky. It ascended swiftly, a searing streak of light against the ever-growing, terrifying shadow of the oblivion, now an undeniably visible and menacing presence. Sarah's drones darted out with astonishing speed, latching onto the ascending pod with powerful magnetic clamps, guiding its initial trajectory with pinpoint precision. Drone Alpha deployed. Filament engagement sequence initiated. Sarah called out, her voice now crisp and authoritative, her deep-seated engineering instincts fully taking over, pushing aside all lingering doubts. High above, in the silent, unforgiving vacuum of space, lead engineer Jackson Jax Kalin, a tiny solitary figure against the overwhelming enormity of the asteroid, readied himself. He was tethered securely to a small maneuvering unit, a grim, unyielding determination etched across his face. The asteroid, while miles wide, still spun slowly on its axis, presenting a daunting, uneven surface of jagged rock, ancient dust, and treacherous craters. He had to find the absolutely perfect anchor points, rock formations that would not, under any circumstances, crumble under the immense, constant pull they were about to exert. "Okay, Jax," Orion's voice came through his comms, surprisingly calm and reassuring amidst the rising tension. "We're looking for that deep fissure near the equatorial ridge. Remember our simulations, the one we called the Serpent's Scar?" Jax spotted it, a surprisingly deep, stable fissure, almost eerily perfect amidst the surrounding chaos of rock. It was a crucial stroke of luck. He fired his specialized grappling hook, the line snapping taut as its hardened tip bit deep into the asteroid's unyielding surface. With practiced grace and an almost balletic precision, he rappelled onto the rotating behemoth, moving with the quiet confidence of a cosmic mechanic riding a truly dangerous, doomsday bull. He secured the first anchor point, then swiftly moved to the next, a silent, perilous dance of precise movements in the unforgiving zero-G. He had to avoid stray debris, which occasionally spun off the asteroid's surface like lethal, silent confetti. One piece, no bigger than his thumb, whizzed past his helmet with a chilling whisper, making him flinch despite himself. "Close one," "Orion," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the comms. Down below, in the glowing heart of the ops center, Lyra Solaris's hands flew across her console. Every tiny fluctuation in each micro-thruster pod's response was instantly relayed to her, and she had to adjust the thrust with extreme, almost surgical precision, keeping the impossibly thin filament tension perfectly balanced. "Pod 3 experiencing minor yaw instability," she called out, her voice tight with focus, compensating, holding steady. Her brow was deeply furrowed in intense concentration, her tongue sticking out slightly from the corner of her mouth, a familiar habit from her most challenging virtual reality sessions. The filaments went taut, not with a sudden, violent jerk, but with a slow, almost imperceptible tightening, like a single muscle flexing across an immense body. On the main screen, the Oblivion's trajectory data shifted. It was so incredibly tiny, almost invisible to the untrained eye, a fractional change in an angle, a microscopic deviation in a vector. But it was undeniably there. A flicker of hope in the data, a whisper of possibility. "It's working," Orion whispered, his voice full of disbelief and profound awe. "It's actually working." Maintaining that tiny, constant tug was an exercise in sheer, grueling tediousness. Hours bled into days, each moment a battle against fatigue and doubt. Lyra's fingers cramped and ached from the constant, delicate adjustments. She relied heavily on the patient teaching of Old Man Tiber and Alara Voss, feeling the tension through the subtle vibrations relayed by the sensitive sensors, anticipating minute shifts in pressure. She learned to read the asteroid's mood from the complex feedback, almost like reading a living entity. "It's pulling hard on filament gamma," she'd report, her voice strained, "like it's subtly resisting. Need a slight thrust increase on Pod 7, Commander." Jax, now back inside the colony but constantly monitoring the filaments from a dedicated observation post, kept a hawk-like watch for any sign of fraying micro-tears or any other stress indicators on the tethers. Sarah, though still rooted in her analytical, data-driven approach, had completely abandoned her initial skepticism. Her brilliant mind was now fully engaged in the real-time recalculations of orbital mechanics, fine-tuning the optimal thrust outputs for each pod based on the asteroid's minute, grudging responses. "We're still within tolerance, Commander," she'd report, her voice betraying a rare, excited edge, but the countdown was merciless, a relentless digital drumbeat. "Impact, in 24 hours, 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Whispers of doubt began to creep insidiously through the colony, a quiet, insidious poison. "Is it really working?" a colonist might nervously ask another. "It still looks like it's coming straight for us, doesn't it?" Valerius felt the immense, crushing pressure. Sleep was a luxury he couldn't possibly afford. There were moments, alone in his austere office, staring at the relentless, ticking countdown, when his tenuous faith in Orion's madness wavered precariously. Had he made the right choice? Was he simply sending his people towards a more drawn-out, agonizing, desperate end? He had a moment of profound, soul-crushing despair, his hand hovering, trembling, over the abort button, the final option. But then, as if sensing his despair, Orion would appear, often carrying a fresh pot of truly terrible nutrient paste, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. He'd walk over to the main screen, point to the incredibly tiny but undeniable change in the Oblivion's predicted path. "Every millimeter counts, Commander," he'd remind him gently, his voice a soft anchor. "Think of it as trying to turn a giant, slow-moving space station, not just nudging a pebble. It takes time, immense patience, but the cosmic currents always respond." His calm, unwavering determination was a solid rock in the steadily rising tide of fear that threatened to engulf them all. The Cygnian Syndicate observers, meanwhile, continued their dispassionate, methodical analysis. Their initial, minuscule probability of success for the human endeavor remained incredibly low, but it had now shifted from an absolute zero to a microscopic, almost immeasurable fraction. The primitive tethering mechanisms, one Cygnian drone reported to its central command, its voice devoid of emotion, exhibit unexpected durability. Their calculations, while based on rudimentary physics, show a persistent, albeit minor, lateral vector. This constitutes an anomaly. Data requires further processing. They were undeniably intrigued, but still supremely confident in their own cold, unwavering logical superiority. They simply could not fathom such an inefficient, almost childlike method actually succeeding. Their own solutions invariably involved complex warp fields or precise, overwhelming asteroid fragmentation, never thread. Part 5. The Near Miss and the Alien Epiphany. As the final hours approached, the Oblivion was no longer just a distant dot. It was a looming, jagged behemoth in the sky. It cast an immense, ominous, shifting shadow across Starlight Haven, a chilling, inescapable reminder of its impending, inevitable arrival. The very air in the colony was thick with a palpable, nervous silence, punctuated only by the crackle of urgent comms from the beleaguered ops center. 6 hours to closest approach. Finn's voice was raw, strained with exhaustion, echoing the weariness felt by everyone. Lyra's eyes were bloodshot, but her absolute focus remained unbroken, filament epsilon showing increased tension. Pod 12, minor thruster degradation, compensating. She was dancing on the very edge of disaster, balancing immense, delicate forces with superhuman concentration. Old Man Tiber and Elara Voss watched over her, their experienced eyes picking up subtle changes in the data that Lyra might miss, guiding her with quiet, encouraging words. "Easy, girl, easy. Just a little more pressure. Feel it breathing, that's it." Jax reported from his observation post, his voice tight, visible fraying on filament beta. "Holding, but it's close, Commander. Very close." Valerius felt a cold, hard knot form in the pit of his stomach. A single filament breaking now could destabilize the entire system, sending the asteroid veering catastrophically back onto its original, fatal trajectory. "Sarah, any way to reinforce filament beta remotely?" Valerius demanded, his voice sharp with desperation. Sarah shook her head, her face pale. "No, Commander. It's too far. The filament is too thin for any in-situ repairs. We've pushed the material to its absolute theoretical limits. It simply has to hold." Her voice was tight with barely suppressed anxiety, a very rare display of emotion for the usually unflappable tactical officer. Orion walked over to the main screen, his eyes scanning the endless stream of data, then looking out at the terrifying mass now dominating the sky. "It's the final, critical tug, Commander," he said, his voice quiet but firm, resonating with absolute conviction. "We need to give it everything we have. This is where the cumulative effect, truly, definitively shows itself." He then made a surprising, almost audacious decision. "Lyra, open up thruster 17 to 105%. We need that extra, final push. And Jax, if filament beta goes, tell us immediately. But don't let it distract you from monitoring the others. Your focus must remain on the system as a whole." Lyra's eyes widened, a flicker of fear, mixed with awe. 105%, Dr. Finch. That's pushing it well past its red line. It could overload. "We're already past the red line, Lyra," Orion replied, a strange, determined glint in his eye. "We're fighting an extinction event. Give it absolutely everything you have." The tension in the ops room was suffocating, almost unbearable. Every single breath felt like a precious luxury. The fate of Starlight Haven, indeed the very future of humanity on this distant, fragile frontier, rested precariously on impossibly thin quantum weave filaments and the steady, unwavering hands of a young navigation specialist. The Oblivion was now immense, a truly colossal presence, filling a significant portion of the sky, its rough, cratered surface clearly visible, even without magnification. It was a terrifying, silent predator, its shadow already a chilling blanket over the colony. People across Starlight Haven stood outside, staring upwards, not in defiance, but in a quiet, collective holding of breath, a community united by shared terror and a fragile hope. There was truly nothing more to do but simply watch and wait. Then came the crucial, heart-stopping moment. 5 minutes to closest approach. Finn shouted, his voice cracking, barely audible above the strained hum of the life support systems. Lyra's hands were a blur of motion, her fingers dancing across the controls with frantic precision. The thrusters of the micro-thruster pods glowed with a desperate, almost suicidal intensity. The filaments hummed, a sound transmitted through the colony's sensitive sensors, a terrifying high-pitched song of unbearable strain. "Filament beta, it's stretching!" Jax yelled, his voice strained with urgency. "Microfractures appearing along the sheath! It's going to snap!" Valerius felt a cold, icy knot form in the pit of his stomach, growing larger with every passing second. He braced himself. This was it. "Hold it, Lyra, just a little more. You've got this," Orion urged, his voice calm, pouring all his unwavering belief into her, a steady anchor in the storm of chaos. The asteroid roared past. Not with a sound, for space was silent, but with a palpable, crushing pressure wave, a sudden, chilling drop in temperature, as its immense shadow enveloped the entire colony. Dust and small rocks, dislodged by its sheer speed, rained harmlessly down like glittering cosmic confetti. The colony shook violently, a deep, rumbling vibration that resonated through the very ground and structures. For a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, it seemed to scrape the absolute edge of Starlight Haven's outermost unpopulated refinery station, causing a spectacular but non-fatal explosion of cosmic dust. Then, it continued on its new, harmless trajectory, a terrifying ghost. A wave of stunned disbelief, then pure, unadulterated relief and explosive joy washed over the colony. The oblivion was moving away. It had passed, not by comfortable kilometers, but by a mere few tens of meters. Close enough that the displaced orbital particulate, a phantom wind, had buffeted the surface domes. Close enough that a few smaller loose fragments had skimmed the outermost atmospheric shields, burning up in spectacular, harmless streaks of light. But it had passed. It had missed, a beat of stunned, disbelieving silence in the ops center. Then, a collective, shaky breath, released as one. Trajectory, nominal. Syrah's voice was hoarse with raw emotion, an uncharacteristic tear tracing a path down her cheek. It's cleared. The Oblivion is on a safe outbound course. We did it." A wave of profound disbelief, immediately followed by pure, unadulterated relief and explosive joy, washed over the ops center. Finn let out a loud, joyous whoop, punching the air. Lyra slumped over her console, utterly exhausted, but a wide, disbelieving grin spread across her face. Old Man Tiber and Alara Voss slapped each other on the back, tears welling in their eyes, their rough hands trembling with joy. Valerius Valstone, the stoic commander, felt a choked sob escape his lips, utterly unable to hold back the flood of relief. He looked at Dr. Orion Finch, his old friend, the eccentric genius who had been laughed at. Orion stood there looking just as disheveled as ever, but with a quiet, undeniable triumph in his eyes. Valerius walked over to him, pulled him into a tight, unexpected, heartfelt hug, and whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "You absolute madman, Orion. You did it. You really, truly did it." Out in the silent blackness, the Cygnian Syndicate observers, who had been patiently, logically expecting a cataclysmic destruction, recorded the data. Their advanced sensors confirmed, unequivocally, the asteroid had been diverted. Not destroyed by immense energy, not fragmented by precision weaponry, but gently, precisely nudged. Analysis confirms the primitive tethering mechanisms, one Cygnian drone reported to its central processing unit, its internal processors whirring furiously, struggling to reconcile the utterly illogical data. Probability of success, calculated as infinitesimal, has yielded a 100% outcome. This defies our established models. The efficiency is non-existent. And yet, it worked. Another Cygnian observer, its multifaceted eyes cycling rapidly through data points, echoed the sentiment, its voice tinged with an almost imperceptible hint of bewilderment. They used quantum weave thread and tiny puffs of gas. How illogical, how utterly absurd, and yet effective. They did not obliterate it. They merely coaxed it. Their species might always resort to overwhelming force or complex energy fields, never subtle manipulation. Their initial, detached amusement at human primitivism, suddenly transformed into a profound confusion, then a grudging curiosity, and finally, a deep, unsettling respect. They understand principles we overlooked, one Cygnian drone concluded, its analytical voice now tinged with something akin to wonder, a concept rarely experienced by their kind. The sheer ingenuity of it. Perhaps, we have fundamentally underestimated this species. They were forced to re-evaluate their entire, long-held assessment of humanity. This wasn't primitive luck, this was a unique, unpredictable, and ultimately effective kind of brilliance. Part 6. The Aftermath and the New Frontier. The colony of Starlight Haven erupted in an unbridled, joyous frenzy. Warning klaxons, which had been counting down to inevitable doom, now blared loudly in triumphant celebration. People poured out of their homes and shelters, embracing strangers, laughing, crying, dancing in the streets. Dr. Orion Finch was hoisted onto shoulders, hailed as a savant, a true visionary, cheered by every single colonist. Commander Valerius Val Stone, now with a genuine beaming smile that reached his eyes, publicly acknowledged his sheer brilliance, proclaiming him the man who saved us all with a spool of thread and an impossible dream. The quantum weave filaments, still trailing faintly from the now distant asteroid, or having safely decoupled after their vital job was done, became an instant, powerful symbol of human ingenuity. Lyra Solaris and Jackson Kalin, utterly exhausted but beaming with exhilaration, were celebrated as heroes for their unwavering precision and incredible grit. Lyra, giggling, signed autographs on hastily printed schematics of her control panel. Jax, true to his quiet form, simply nodded and offered small, rare smiles as colonists cheered for him, clearly touched by their appreciation. Sir Vance, though still intensely analytical, expressed a newfound, almost reluctant respect for non-linear problem-solving, even suggesting her next major project might involve bioadaptive filament systems for deep space resource retrieval. She found herself less focused on rigid protocols and more captivated by the chaotic, yet undeniable, beauty of unconventional physics. In the days that followed, Starlight Haven transformed, becoming a shining beacon of human ingenuity throughout the scattered galactic frontier. News of the quantum weave miracle spread rapidly through subspace channels, reaching other distant colonies, and even, to their astonishment, the attention of galactic councils, who had previously deemed humanity a minor, developing species, barely worthy of their notice. Scientists from other human outposts contacted Orion, eager to learn about his groundbreaking minimal force gravitational manipulation theory, a truly revolutionary concept. The gravitational lever system technique, once a desperate, last-ditch gamble, was now being actively adapted for a myriad of other crucial purposes, guiding dangerous orbital debris away from vulnerable space stations, precisely maneuvering smaller asteroids for efficient resource mining, and even as a novel concept for safer, slower deep space docking procedures. Dr. Orion Finch, no longer just an eccentric but a universally revered visionary, now proudly led a brand new, highly funded research division, the Department of Minimal Intervention Physics. His lab was still a glorious, delightful mess, but now it was filled with enthusiastic, bright-eyed students, eager to learn how to solve seemingly impossible problems with brilliantly simple, elegant answers, just like their mentor. And then, one quiet morning, a single, sleek, unarmed scout ship appeared on Starlight Haven's long-range scanners. It was undeniably alien, unlike any human craft ever seen. The Cygnian Syndicate. They had observed, they had analyzed, they had re-evaluated, and now, they approached. Not with a grand, intimidating fleet, but with a cautious, almost humble curiosity. Their first communication wasn't a threat, or a demand, or even a typical diplomatic greeting. It was a single, profound query, transmitted across all known frequencies, translated into every human language. Elucidate your methodology, the gravitational lever system. We observed, and our computational models yield no comparable solution for such an outcome. We seek understanding. How did you do that? The humans, though naturally cautious, quickly realized that these aliens were genuinely curious, driven by data and logical intrigue, not aggression. It was the unexpected beginning of a new relationship, one built not on fear or technological might, but on the shared wonder of a bizarre, ingenious, and profoundly human solution. The Cygnian Syndicate, masters of complex equations and advanced physics, suddenly found themselves with much to learn from humanity's innate knack for simple, elegant defiance. And perhaps, humanity in turn had much to learn from the Cygnans about the universe's grand, intricate designs. The final scene unfolded in a peaceful, almost idyllic manner. Dr. Orion Finch, back in his beloved lab, was meticulously knotting a new length of quantum weave filament onto a miniature, glowing model of a starship. He looked out of his lab window at the distant, star-studded sky. The faint, harmless glow of the Oblivion, now a tiny, ever-receding speck, was faintly visible far off in the distance, a beautiful, constant reminder of the extraordinary day humanity saved itself, with nothing more than a simple piece of thread and an unyielding will. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Sometimes, he mused aloud to the seemingly empty lab, to the quietly humming kinetic sculpture, to the vast, indifferent expanse of the distant stars. The biggest problems truly do have the simplest solutions. You just need to know how to hold the line. Or, in this case, the thread.